Are you tired of watching shows that only give you general social media theory and expect you to figure out how to apply it to your own industry? Join us for this week's episode of Social Chatter, the industry's longest running social media marketing news talk show. Not only will you learn the latest breaking news, but you'll also gain practical advice on how to apply it. Now here's your host, Christian Karasevich.
Welcome everyone to Social Chatter, your weekly social media marketing news talk show. This is episode 334 with myself, Sarah Monroe, and this week's guest is Bob Farnham. And we're really excited to talk about a lot of Instagram news this week. We got some Twitter news. I think we might even have some meta news, but I'm going to go and bring on Sarah. We're going to kick things off. We're going to be talking about, by the way, about the importance of focus when it comes to social media, specifically focus on Instagram. And there's a reason why. We'll get to that here in a second. But Sarah, it's great seeing you. How you doing?
Great to see you too. Yes, this week it's all about the apps. We're all about the apps and how those development teams are focusing down onto products, and just a few of them too, as they develop new fun tools to go along with us. And today, sorry, I have many alerts buzzing in my ear this morning because we've been juggling technology all morning. But I'm really happy to welcome someone who's been a longtime viewer of ours, and he's a friend of mine, another Vermonter. It's Bob Farnham, also known as Bob the Green Guy. He uses social media to help people learn about energy efficiency, to promote renewable energy, and to really help us fight this climate crisis that we're in the middle of. So welcome, Bob.
Hello. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
I finally worked through the technology. You know me and learning technology. It's not my strong suit.
Oh, it's you underestimate yourself, Bob. I think we have to we both live in rural areas of the country, and so we just have to roll with what happens. Sometimes it just works against us, but
I have learned to roll with the punches. Yeah, you definitely have to. You just never know what's going to happen, so especially live, when you're doing it live like this. I've been leaning a lot more towards recording, just for the reason that you can take out all the ums and ahs and the mix-ups as to which room I'm supposed to be in just before the show starts and all that stuff.
Right. Although, Bob, I have to say, of knowing about, sort of looking at the timeline of when live video started, I think you were one of the first people, certainly the first person I ever knew personally, but some of the first people to really adopt live streaming. And you were out in the fields, literally out in fields, live streaming about different renewable energy events, and really producing this online content for people who couldn't be at these events, where far afield, literally. So
I just, no one else was doing it. And I felt like it was, an important message to get out there. And it's such a powerful tool that it seemed silly not to try to figure it out. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
it was hard early on. It was really not as easy as StreamYard is, In the old days, it was a real pain. Now I can walk into the State House with my phone and a tripod and stream to, a bigger audience than my local TV station. So it's crazy. It's
exactly. Exactly.
And before we jump into the news, Sarah, I just want to make sure, just mention, the thing I like that you mentioned about Bob a second ago is that when people think social media, they think, they think marketing, for example, they think that that's the one focus they're looking at. And the thing is, you can use it for any initiative you want. So, in Bob's case, I mean, you've taken that initiative, you've kind of taken that torch and run with it, which is great. And the other thing is, if you're in a space where there are other people that are also doing the same thing, don't look at them as competitors, potentially look at them as allies. And then this way you can work together to help, champion a cause. So, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's kick things off with this week's news.
Sure. Let's get going. So we're going to start with Instagram. And Instagram has announced that they are shutting down some apps. And for some of you, you may be remembering, what app? So not WhatsApp, but what app? So the Instagram news that's coming out today is that they are shutting down Boomerang and Hyperlapse as separate apps. So those of us who use Instagram video, you know that you can record a reel or a story and use that little Boomerang function within the Instagram app. So what they're doing is shutting down Boomerang as its own app. So for those of you who still use Boomerang for creating some video that you may repurpose somewhere else, you're not going to be able to use that app now. And what's interesting is that the announcement came after they actually shut it down. So it's out of the App Store as of March 1st. Don't know how long it will exist on your phones. I honestly haven't checked to see if I still have Boomerang or Hyperlapse. But this is actually a trend when we look at what Facebook, Instagram, Meta as a whole company has been doing. My most beloved Facebook standalone app was Local, and it shut down. I want to say it shut down. It might still be struggling a little bit, but it really kind of disappeared, I want to say late fall. So what we're seeing is that these companies are really focusing their attention and their development teams onto all of the bells and whistles within the apps. There had been a time in the early days where they just didn't want to overstuff it with too many buttons, too many options, and now it's just exploded. We all know when we're trying to find a filter or some kind of fun effect, there is literally millions of options in there. So they've just decided rather than try to keep maintaining these separate apps, it's just all going into the main app. So that's really all that's part of this announcement. I did want to add that in case you were wondering, Facebook in this past year has also shut down Local, Lasso, and Campus. That's one of the new ones that we're hearing about. There's a fourth one. It's not quite coming to me right now, but I'll open up to you guys and see what you think about this.
Oh, we lost Bob. Hopefully he'll come back.
Love rural internet. You gotta love rural internet.
I blinked and I was like, where'd he go? So I gotta say this. I mean, you mentioned something really important, and it's the fact that as you are adding all these new features, you have to look at scale as well. And so while your mobile device is a very powerful device, it can only do so much. And a lot of times what people will do is they'll use it for one specific app. And so I like the fact that Instagram is starting, they're rolling out an app and they're seeing if it works, and then they're deciding if they want to add it in as a feature. Again, you just have to be careful because it does create, too many things you have to do to then get to post something. But I do like the fact that they're starting to help improve that focus, because a lot of people, we struggle, I think, don't we, Sarah? I mean, there's so many apps out there. Which one do we use? We could use 5 apps to accomplish one little tiny thing. So
Right. Well, yeah, there's both sides to it, right? There's so many options within an app. It's like, you just can't figure out what's what, right?
Absolutely.
So it's hard to find where the button is to do anything sometimes.
So here's Bob. Let me bring him back in. Bob, how we doing?
I'm back. I clicked the wrong button there for a second.
That's all right.
So we were talking about, the fact that Instagram is removing Boomerang and Hyperlapse. They've removed a bunch of other apps as well. What's your take on this?
Well, I always feel like simplify, and having the multiple apps. I don't know. I think it's just easier having it all in one place, and to consolidate. So that's the route I always try to go. It's I don't remember who. I think maybe it was Abraham Lincoln who said, write a letter. No, it was, anyway, somebody famous wrote a note about how it was important to keep your notes short, but it takes longer to write a short note than it takes to write a long note. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I went with that, but simplify is the key point that I wanted to make.
Yeah. So, and I think in this announcement too, some of the layout apps that Instagram has, I think those are likely to disappear too, because now you can move things around.
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram when you're doing multiples. So, I honestly, it keeps people in the app. right? You're not jumping out. And so sometimes maybe if you give up, you see an ad faster, right? Or something like that. So.
And the other thing you got to remember about a lot of these apps is that Instagram might use them as a testing ground. So they may come out with the app, and some of these, I mean, they've been around for a few years, but some of them, they may use them and say, hey, you know what, we've noticed usage is dwindled. For example, is there a competitor out there that has a better app than we have, and then they could acquire them and bring that into the app. But again, it's all about making, like, in a sense, shedding the fat and making it like streamlined and not having so many different hoops to jump through. So
yeah. Although I got to say, with Facebook Local, I loved Facebook Local. It was basically what they did was they pulled out all of the events for Facebook events. So your profile still powered the algorithm to offer you events, but it was so much easier to look through. In fact, I think I hooked about 6 millennials on this. They'd given up on Facebook. They moved to these were friends of mine who are new college grads. And they'd moved to new communities. They were a little down about trying to meet people. And I said, well, look through Facebook events. I don't want to use Facebook. I said, well, then use local. Well, what's local? And they loved it and fell in love with it. And I loved that it was just focused on events. So if I was planning, like I would plan business trips and things back when I traveled. And I was able to find some great stuff on the evenings that I had downtime. I actually found an amazing thing to do on a vacation. We still talk about that one thing that we did, and I found it because of Facebook Local. So, I mean, there's some that I like to see stay, but honestly, I don't think I've opened Boomerang in 3 years, probably. I just use it in the app. So it makes perfect sense. And
they would probably, by the way, they probably are going to roll that into, how they're kind of switching to that TikTok model. They're probably going to roll it in as a feature there as well. So again, it's all about consolidating the resources, streamlining things, as Bob said, simplifying things. So, okay. So that's Instagram news. Obviously, I mean, removing these apps. Sarah, is there any other Instagram news this week that's going on?
There is Instagram news, and this is great for the creator community. And Instagram was really purposeful. And when they wrote their announcement of this, they're enhancing creator tags. So what this is going to do is give credit to the people behind the scenes who may not be recognized for the work that they're doing. So this is really important as we move to more monetization when it comes to influencers and content, those hundreds of millions of dollars that are out there in the creator funds. So what this is doing is just giving a little more enhancement to when you tag your content. And this is particularly important for underrepresented and marginalized people who haven't been getting their content. Their content is being scraped off by others and then repurposed, and celebrities pick it up, and we can never find the trail back to the original creator. So what this is going to do is when you actually tag in photos, you're going to have the option to add a profile category. So if you look very closely, it might be hard for you to see if you're watching on a small screen, but we will link the blog posts that explain this in our show notes and in the blog post that goes out this weekend. But in that center picture underneath the names, it actually has a category like the photographer, there's a rapper, there's a stylist, who are all tagged in that, so that those people, that creative talent is getting recognition for what they did behind the scenes in this photo. So I think this is great. My hope is that this kind of micro level tagging can actually get down to the audio level too, because I know that there's tons of audio out there, especially as reels are exploding. It's very difficult to get back to see who was the original creator of that, and will they get any credit for it. So what do you guys think of this?
Ooh, this is pretty cool. I don't know. I like the fact that, what comes to mind when I'm thinking like movie credits, right? And I'm watching movie credits. I know like the big actors, the director, but then I don't know like who the stunt coordinator was, for example, who was, if it's a major band, yes. But if it's, a very unknown band, I can see that right if I spend time looking at the credits. And I like that this is actually kind of would potentially add some of those tags. I think that would be very useful for helping give people the credit that they deserve on this. So I'm all for this. What do you think, Bob?
Well, I think micropayments come to mind for me. Monetizing our work online is really tricky, and it's changing now. And being able to have trackable, credit to go back to the people that deserve acknowledgement on either monetarily or at least have their name associated with the work. I don't see any downside to it.
Yeah, this is again, very simple update. I think all you have to do is update the Instagram app and you should start to see this. So again, I think the key thing is just make sure you give people credit where credit's due. I mean, everybody should have, if you're into social media and you want to grow your presence, you should have a profile. And this is a great way for you to actually get some of that recognition without actually shining the spotlight on yourself. Having other people that you do work for saying, hey, you know what? It's like giving somebody a recommendation on LinkedIn, right? Like, hey, I recommend this person, or this is the person that does this type of work, because then that, gives them the credit that they deserve for it. So.
Right.
Okay. Sarah, anything else you want to add on this?
No, I really believe in it. It's interesting. I've been watching a lot of reel content, and Instagram has gotten so accustomed to me clicking to if there's an audio piece that I like, I think it's kind of funny, I want to see who created it. So Instagram Reels is now offering me the original, right? I'm not seeing the knockoffs. I'm seeing the originals much more frequently. So it does matter. I think it really does matter. And when we're talking about people who get, when your content is shared so much, you start to get so much further away from that monetization that I think it's really important to come back to it. But I've said it 4 times now, so I'm going to go on to the next the next topic, which some internet sleuths, our favorite internet sleuth, Alessandro Paluzzi, has found that Instagram is toying with a subscription sticker. And I have to say, this news is all over the Instagram chat rooms that I'm in. None of us have seen it, so we don't really know what the functionality is. It was just a screenshot put up in a tweet, so we don't know what it clicks to, but we could imagine that this might be a lead gen form that's coming to Instagram stories, I believe, at this point. So we'll see where it goes. It's always fun and frustrating to see what Instagram gives you and Instagram takes away when it comes to these kinds of functionalities. But I think it will be a great option to have that subscribe button right there within a story.
Yeah, definitely. And I know not a lot to this one. But I'm wondering if the subscription piece is it another thing that somebody can charge me for? Or is it hey, I'm subscribed to somebody on YouTube, that kind of, angle? Makes me wonder. So. Right.
It could be newsletters, who knows, any kind of link. It's been, I have to say, working in advocacy, especially having that link in stories, especially for our small accounts, has been huge, absolutely huge for conversions within our Instagram stories. Bob, I see you nodding. Are you finding the same thing?
Sorry, I had muted myself. Yeah, that's a great idea. And honestly, I haven't even, isn't it funny, the things you just skip right over? You think you've got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and then you turn around and go, that's the simplest thing I could be doing. Why aren't I doing it? So that's why I always tune into the show, because I always learn stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I have gone back and listened to the show again, because I hear it with different ears. I hear it with the influence of hearing it the first time, and then I hear it again, and I'm like, oh yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, pro tip: when you press on that little link sticker, you can paste in the URL. But then, if you press below, it says create custom text. You can customize the text, so it doesn't have to say link. It can say buy tickets, subscribe. sign up for the race, or so. I'm promoting a 5K right now. Yeah. So you can have a fun call to action, like lace up or whatever it is, to have some fun with them.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
Sarah.
Absolutely.
So I know we got a couple more topics we want to talk about, and then we want to make sure we spend time talking with Bob. So
absolutely. So let's run through some Twitter news. We've got 2 pieces of Twitter news. One, they are rolling out a creator dashboard. So this is going to be an easier way for folks who have monetized their Twitter accounts to keep track of subscriptions, ticket sales, promotions. It sounds like super follows and subscriptions will also be within this. So you'll see that's what Twitter put out, so that you can just keep track of all the monthly payments that you have coming your way. The other thing, again, from Alessandro Paluzzi, is that we're seeing a Twitter podcast line within the sidebar. So if you look down, it's just one up from the bottom, excuse me. And so we'll see what's happening. If folks remember, last year, Twitter acquired Breaker, which is a podcasting app. And with Twitter Spaces continually chugging along, Twitter Spaces has now been rolling for about a year. It'll be interesting to see if Twitter's going to become this podcasting aggregator as well. And maybe even if your Twitter Spaces can automatically become a podcast, and maybe that can send it out to the other podcasting apps. Who knows? We have no idea. There's no context. Again, like the subscription piece, there's no context to this. No one is talking from the companies. No one is talking at Social Media Today or TechCrunch or The Verge or Wired or anything. So we'll see where these come from. These are just the early stages. Hey, I saw this kind of news.
I got to say, off of that news, the one that really interests me the most is the podcasting one, Twitter podcasting, because I could easily see them. I mean, again, this comes back to focus on social media. I could easily see Twitter rolling out some sort of podcasting service to convert your spaces into podcasts. Again, I mean, or even having some sort of way to hook it into maybe an existing service. But what do you think, Bob?
I get overwhelmed. There's so many, I can't keep up. And I was talking to somebody the other day about, the Simplify issue and trying to figure out what was the best route. Podcasting, of course, is a great opportunity. And this looks like an interesting, I'm still trying to get my mind wrapped around the different ways that Twitter could be implementing that. So it's very exciting, and I love to try to keep up, but honestly, I watch your show so that I can keep up. So to be on it while you're dispensing the news doesn't give me time to like figure out how can I use that. And the other part of the being overwhelmed with ideas and systems is that we don't have to be experts at them to decide if we can implement it into our marketing strategy in the way we do business. Getting up to that classic 80% of knowledge about something is really empowering, because it gives you the opportunity to feel like you're making an informed choice. You know what? I think I'm going to not do this, or I think I am going to do that. So, there's only so many hours in the day, and my business is as a solopreneur. So it's I don't have a lot of people that I can defer to and say, hey, you work on this. So it always ends up being me. But anyway, it's exciting. It's anything supporting podcasting, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. I mean, I don't know if they're going to. I mean, remember at one time they tried to do audio tweets. So. I mean, this could go all sorts of directions. It could be audio tweets. It could be Twitter Spaces. It could be a podcasting service. It could be, maybe it even becomes part of the super follows piece where, people pay you for access to exclusive content. So, but I'm looking forward to this one. We'll see where it goes. Sarah, anything else you want to bring up?
No, let's jump into, Bob keeps talking about simplifying. I'm now going to blow up because LinkedIn, the LinkedIn Sales Navigator dashboard has more detail in it than you could ever possibly need. So when I was reading this, I was thinking, LinkedIn does this? for a lot of us, we're not doing sales on LinkedIn. But for those who are, there is a very powerful client CRM behind LinkedIn that you can use for your sales navigation. So think of bringing what it's doing is it's bringing in all of the power that you have through the LinkedIn network and the connections and the searches and pulling in different people with a very robust CRM. So what they've announced, I haven't had a chance to read through the whole announcement. As we know, LinkedIn likes to have very long announcements. And so what they're doing is they're pulling together data, trends, bookmarks, they're improving the search option, and they're advancing the CRM. So this, I think, is the dashboard one. Our next screenshot has a screenshot of the advanced CRM. So for those who use LinkedIn, what I think is really interesting is that they're bringing all these tools that other platforms use, but you get the power of all the people who are on LinkedIn to tap. Whereas, if you were having your own CRM on a different platform, you may not be able to bring in all that data from those other profiles. Profiles would have to be within your CRM. So I think it's interesting. It's not my gig, but I think for those who do use it, I think they're excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of these comments we're getting, and Phil Gerbershak has also told me a lot about this. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is it's an amazing product for that a lot of people don't tap into. Like you said, Sarah.
Yep, and Kate Payne just jumped in, another former guest and Vermont show today, right? And someone else said, Patricia said, darn, I keep forgetting about LinkedIn. So yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Although you've got Kate here, and let's just give her a quick shout out about LinkedIn. If you're thinking about, if you're like me sitting here going, oh yeah, I really need to, upgrade my attention to LinkedIn. Kate is a great person to connect with. She's got some great videos, and she's just great. So
yeah, and she was on our show. We'll find as we're talking, we'll find what show Kate was on with us, because she had some terrific tips for personal branding and for using some of the lesser known aspects of LinkedIn that we may not remember, or again, another button that we didn't know existed and couldn't find, right?
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's finish up with some meta news. We've been talking about companies focusing. Meta is actually now announcing a new app, which is a little different from the earlier top of the show news. But Meta is offering a Move Tasks app, is what they're calling it. Love the tongue twisters, especially when I'm hoarse in the morning. So this is basically a small scale productivity app where you can work with your friends or colleagues. They're basically gamifying your task list, right? So that you can organize group tasks. And as you finish them, you get rewards, which will be points for your avatar. So here we go. We've talked about the metaverse and how people will have avatars, and you can earn or buy different aspects of your avatar in metaverse. We may all have a digital wardrobe. So what they're doing is gamifying to-do lists so that you can earn points for your avatar too. So also, I have to say, I've been working with some accountability partners recently, and it's great to have that collaboration and hold each other accountable. Hey, did you do that? And just have someone else ask, what's holding you back, right? Over the last few months, we've been talking about agile marketing and how the weekly stand-ups are usually, what are you doing? What did you do? What are you doing next? What's holding you back, or what's in your way, right? And so having this gamified task list can actually help with that. So what do you guys think of Move Tasks app? I have to say it slowly because it is a tongue twister. But for short, they're just calling it Move, I guess.
Bob, what do you think on this one?
Well, I'm curious about the data that they're collecting from all that, right? Because we're I don't know. It makes me a little uncomfortable but other applications do similar things. So I guess there's no reason why it couldn't work. And I do, gamification does motivate people. I know when I step on the scale in the morning, it's just a number, right? But if it's a number that's too high or too low, then I'm inspired to take action. And that's what we're all trying to do, is get people to take action, some in business, some in causes. So, so it's interesting. And I couldn't really see very well the display and how it's going to be shown to us, but in the user interface, it should be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very. I mean, I think what you're going to probably end up seeing here is, I think you're going to end up seeing a lot of people. I think they're going to test it out, and then they might decide to roll it into things or not. I could easily see this becoming part of just the whole metaverse, as Sarah, as you mentioned. To where you've got something to do, and it's like, oh, I need to bring up my to-do list. You can, start to think Minority Report, all that kind of stuff, where it's able to virtually bring up this to-do list, and then your friends are able to get notification when you check off something, things like that. That visual aspect that we tend to prefer. So
right, yeah, that new product. When I was looking at it, reminded me of some of just the design specs that they had put out when they launched Ray-Ban Stories. Was that you could have this little heads up display. Hey, you have a task coming up, just like your phone reminds you of a task or an appointment or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they integrate it and what this does. They didn't really talk about what this will do with Meta Workplace either.
Yeah.
And so this could be one of the sandboxes that they're playing in, that will then be another product, or another aspect of another product. So it's always interesting. It's always fun to speculate. Why are they doing this? Who is doing this? Where's this going to go? Right.
Definitely.
That's why I immediately went to the data, because I know that they're driven by that, and most of us just don't take the time to look at analytics and figure out what's working and what's not working, and they are so.
Right. And what the companies do with their data. I think I've been listening to way too much Kara Swisher lately, and who's a tech reporter in Silicon Valley. And she's rough. She's rough on the tech companies about how they're using data. So, and their company policies too. So anyway, I digress. So
let's do this. So that's the news for the week.
Yep.
So now we want to make sure we obviously like to spend time with our guests and learn a little more about them. So Sarah, let's open up the Q&A.
Sure. Open up the Q&A. So we did talk a little bit about how Bob does do a lot of video for business. He does it for himself as a climate activist. He does it for lots of others. He is one of those people who's behind the scenes and constantly working on new projects. So Bob, let's talk. It's funny, when we prepped for this show, Bob talked about this, and I said, this has been something that I have been talking to friends about, and just circling around this idea of onboarding clients and how it doesn't work most of the time, right? And what we can do to make it better. So Bob, let's start with that, because you work with a variety of people, a pretty big client list. So let's talk about the pitfalls that you've had with onboarding, and maybe we can twist it a little bit and talk about the positive, or what could work with onboarding.
Great. Well, one of the things that I'm finding is that the pandemic has changed everything. And I hear people say, "Oh, we need to get back to normal," and I'm thinking that that's probably not a good idea, because normal is what got us here. And so anyway, there's a lot of change in the air, and one of the things that I'm seeing is that visitors to your website who are trying to learn more about what you're doing shouldn't be made to feel stupid. They should be made to feel smart. And one of the reasons I think that we're not bringing people on board is because we use acronyms and we use industry lingo. And it just seems to me that trying to, rather than having a Q&A section on your website, build the answers into your website, so that as people are exploring, they're learning. They've got that question in their mind, but then they discover the answer, not in the Q&A, but in the way you're presenting what you do and how you do it. So just rethinking what we're out there doing. Online learning is huge now, and yet we still put up our website with maybe all the information's there, but it's not in an orderly fashion. It's not the way kids learn. I mean, kindergartners don't do algebra. They play with blocks, or they learn social skills, or they learn what's appropriate for them at their age or at their place in life. And it's the same is true for visitors to our sites, or our audience, or customers, or prospects. Making it easy for them to get to that 80% that I talked about earlier, helping them get to the point where they go, oh, I get it. They have an epiphany. That's what I strive to do with my audience, is have them get to the point where they go, oh, I get it now. Because once they have that experience, they can never go back to the way it was before. They're in, and so if somebody understands that solar power is definitely a good option for them, because they learned that all the different standards that they have to have, they can do. And so it totally makes sense for them to have solar, and they'll probably strive to get it. It may take them a while, but they're committed once they had that epiphany. So I just think that we have so many unintentional barriers in place for doing business with people. And I think that the pandemic really brought a lot of that to light, and it just really emphasized how it wasn't working. So let me just take a peek at my notes here, because I did take a couple. Well, one of the things that I'm finding is that we're not really strategic in the way we are sharing information, and we're kind of randomly sharing posts on social media. We're randomly writing blog posts that we put on a chronological ordered blog, and yeah, the information's on our site, but are we making it accessible to the people that are looking for it? So I just don't think we're telling the whole story the way that we're doing it, and right. that's where video comes in for me.
What I like about your approach, Bob, is that, and it calls to mind some of the equity work that I've been working in too, is that you're calling people in, right? You're not calling people out. And we're going to use your industry as an example, right? You're not calling people out for driving the big SUVs and maybe not composting. We live in a state where it's mandatory composting, right? So there's a lot of things that we do in this little corner of the Northeast of the United States that a lot of other communities don't do. But we still have that reluctance, or that lack of confidence in ourselves when people, attack us, or the language could feel like it's attacking us. So instead of we're called out instead of being called in, where we can lean into energy efficiency because the language is approachable. And Bob, your videos are phenomenal too, about saying, hey, I live in a very cold climate and I figured out how to use an electric vehicle. Let me show you how, right? That you're not getting into all of the technical aspects right out of the gate. It's there for those who need it, but you're just showing them, hey, this is how I manage my battery life in a cold climate, or this is how I do, manage my charging, or things like that. So you're calling people into your conversation.
I couldn't have said it any better. Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. It's, I just remember as a kid, one traumatic experience was Cub Scouts. And I joined the Cub Scouts but the experience for me was a little overwhelming because there was the lingo, there was the acronyms. They were talking in the group language that I didn't really understand yet, and totally turned me off to the whole experience, and I never went back. And, if our customers are doing that, if they're experiencing, and it doesn't take much of a barrier for them to go, you want my last name too for the email? I'm just going to, and it won't let you do it if I don't give you my last name. See ya. So, there's so much to it, and the opportunities are huge now. And that's why I see, using video to tell those stories. Like I said a second ago, where we're not telling the whole story. I mean, how many times have you had somebody ask you a question and your response, at least in your head, is, that's a long story. And yet they want you to do it in like a bullet point or two, or a sentence or two. Well, tell me just generally, how does that work? And it's really a struggle. And so figuring out how we can satisfy those needs of people that are interested in what you're doing, and help them sort of not experience the barriers, not experience carrying a question around in their head that they still haven't found the answer to on your site yet. And try to, and we have the technology now to be able to know what they're thinking, and using social so that you can have interaction. I did a post recently on snow tires in Vermont, and I had well over 100. I don't know. There were a lot of comments people made. And from that, I'm now able to understand that some information from people's experiences that I haven't had, and I can apply that to how I do my next post. And so, it's just so important to be listening as much as to be broadcasting.
Right. And I think if we bring in some social media trends to this too, people seem to think that they have short attention spans, but then you find them reading through a long blog post about something that interests them. It's finding the right content to connect with them, right?
Absolutely. And the Super Bowl ads for $1 million or whatever they go for now are just blanketing the society with that ad. And I don't need 1 million people. I need 1,000 people, know? And so really trying to meet the needs of the smaller audience allows the experience to be richer and much more personal than it would be for, a $1 billion company has a different presence online than Bob the Green Guy, so.
Right. But a great impact too, I will say, for Bob the Green Guy.
Well,
it is kind of funny.
And one point I want to just add real quick. I mean, and I think, again, like we've talked about, this kind of been the theme of this week's show, which is, being mindful about what all you ask your customers to do, or people that visit your website, what you ask them to do, because the more friction you create, the more steps they have to take, the harder it's going to be for them, potentially, and you may lose the person as a result.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Right.
Don't think that you need millions of customers. Start with that small base and build, because, again, you're going to find the right niche. And as you mentioned, Bob, you get a lot of comments. I mean, that's fantastic. And a lot of people, we have this thing of like, oh, I'm not getting 1,000. I'm not getting 10,000. And it's like, well, you don't necessarily need 10,000, 100. That's really good. So,
right.
So,
and Bob and I work in that friction piece. Bob and I both work in advocacy work where we have to report. So we have to educate our communities, our audiences, our customers, that we need this information to report to the people who are supporting this information, right? So grant funders or whatever, we have to map our reach. And the only way to do that is with a little extra data, like first name, so we can personalize an email, and zip codes so that we can map how far the information is spreading and things like that. So I don't know, for the consumers out there who get frustrated by the extra boxes, know that people like me and Bob are on the backside saying, we got Sorry.
Well, and we're also trying to, I think that as far as I'm concerned anyway, I try to, with that knowledge, I try to create an experience for them that is better. And so that I'm answering their needs. If I'm talking about widgets and they came to talk about something else entirely or to learn something entirely different, me forcing widget information to them by email or social media posts or whatever is not going to satisfy them. So it's really just listening to your audience, and your audience doesn't necessarily have to be huge. At least for a lot of the people that are probably watching this show, you don't need a monster audience to change the world. So,
yeah.
So Sarah, we got another question, I think, from Bob, right?
Yeah, we do. So let's combine, because we're running a little short on time. But Bob, let's talk about how you use a lot of video to educate and entertain, right? But you also use video in your newsletters, and this is becoming, I'm seeing it more and more, but I'm also not seeing it from brands, right? I'm not seeing it from the bigger newsletter lists that I'm on. I'm seeing it in the smaller ones. So can you talk about how let's combine the two, how you are using video to entertain and educate and folding those into your newsletters?
Yes, we can do that. One of the, curated email newsletters have been around for a long time, and people have gone out and found articles or a blog post somewhere, and they just give us a quick overview about it and then direct you to the site where you can read more about it. Well, the same is true now using video. And one of the pieces of software actually that I work using is OBS, and I'll get into it at some point maybe, but basically being able to use video recording software where I can be on screen and have a web page sort of behind me that I'm referencing. So in my case, let's say, for example, the Burlington Free Press has an article about widgets. I can have the article on the screen and talk about, what I think is important about that, and have the URL on the screen. I can have the URL in the show notes so that they can, go check it out. So using video, for me anyway, is getting easier and easier, and being able to incorporate them into an email. Hey, I was just thinking, check this out. And to be able to sit there, and this comes back to the barriers, to have an idea, to be able to take that idea and make a short video out of it that I can send to a prospect or to an organization that I'm working with, to share that knowledge quickly and easily. I think sometimes it's just easier to do it that way. I think it's easier to pick up the phone sometimes and say, okay, so here's the deal, as opposed to texting back and forth on your phone or, on your laptop or whatever. So let's see. I had a couple notes and things that I wanted to talk about in this category. Well, I just think there's so many different ways that we can use video to, from showing, the idea is telling stories, really, right? And when I think about Ken Burns, do you remember Ken Burns and his TV shows on PBS? He took still images and brought them to life by simply moving them slowly across the screen or zooming in slowly on them as the story is told in the background. And I thought, well, gosh, I can do that. That's not actually that hard to do. So incorporating that stuff and incorporating B-roll. So when you've got a talking head like me on the screen right now, there's no reason why we couldn't have been cutting away to some muted video footage of another episode that I did, talking about a web page or about a video or whatever, so that you could see the example that I'm talking about. So B-roll is really easy to get now. You can even get copyright protected so that you're not violating any copyrights and stuff like that. Let's see. I know we're running low on time, so I'm jumping over a lot of the stuff
keep
that
going.
I wanted to talk.
Keep going. It's fine. Keep going.
One of the the story that I wanted to tell in this section was, Vermont spends $2.1 billion a year on fossil fuel. So for heating our homes and for moving us and our things around, $2.1 billion with 630,000 people in Vermont. And we realize that 1.7 billion of that leaves the state economy every year. And so that system just does not work. And the pandemic has pointed that out because now a lot of people are able to work from home. So we have a big opportunity to change a system that was in place that really didn't satisfy our needs. It satisfied the fossil fuel industry's needs. They had a captive audience and they took our money. So it worked out great. And plus we burn it. It's gone. We can't use it again. You can't recycle it and use it again like you can a glass bottle. So it's a huge, to change society's perception on what it means to heat their homes and to get around it's a big project. And to think that you can do it on a 2 or 3 page website is comical. So the idea that I was thinking of is more along the lines of using video to have in a sense, an online course. I don't really call it that, but it takes people through that process of understanding so that they're building on their knowledge base. After they participate in each video, they have enough more knowledge to be able to take on more information. It goes right back to the kindergarten kid and playing with blocks and learning social skills, and not algebra. They'll learn algebra in 6th grade or whenever it is, but not yet. And so having all our information on our website is great, but if it's not in really the right order and it doesn't nurture them through that process, I think we're missing the ball on that one. So having taking people through that process of understanding why is our transportation system the way it is? Why do Vermonters heat their homes the way they do? It's antiquated, it's changing, and it's going to take a lot for people to understand it. So having them understand how the Native Americans moved around the state. They moved around the state in the rivers. In using canoes, right? And then white people came here and they set up villages in the valleys next to the rivers so that they could use the power. So having people go through the understanding of how the interstate system came here, and then they start to realize we've created a system that really does not serve us, so they're having that epiphany, right? And they go, oh, we need to come up with a new way to do this. And if it comes from them, that's where the real power is. If Vermonters drive the issue of how we're going to get around, no pun intended, I think that the politicians will get in line and run up in front of the parade and lead us. So it's a big thing. It's a big project to take on, to expect that you can do it with the way we've been doing it. So that's sort of sums it up. And the other part of it, of course, was, I don't know if you watched Harry Potter, but there's one particular scene in Harry Potter that at the time it changed the world for me. And that was Harry Potter was in a place and reading a newspaper, and he opened up the newspaper and we're looking at him, and on the front cover of the newspaper was a moving image. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We can totally do that now. It might not be a newspaper, but it's a flat surface, right? So that changed my perception on how we get information out there, and it's using multi-purpose ways of getting it out there. So video, audio, text, images. Everybody interprets information differently. So I just think that figuring out the best ways of getting all that into your storytelling so that people can have that epiphany and work their way through the process, it's key. Where else can I go on this? It's very cool.
No, I think that's great, Bob. I think it's you've mentioned it a couple of times in some of the news that we share here on this show. People learn things in different ways. Going back to some of those tools, some of those social media tools and tricks, and how can I integrate this? How can I integrate these hooks into a very complicated process like energy efficiency or green energy when it comes to our transportation, right? Or changing these big, hairy issues that we have in our society and using some of these tools that are getting people's attention, but pulling them into a bigger conversation where they can learn a lot more. It's a challenge. I think for some businesses, their business is very straightforward. For others, it's these big, hairy projects, and it takes very thoughtful ways to work people through that content. So
when I was younger, I had short-term goals, and that was all I had was short-term goals, because everything had to happen, and it had to happen right now or else, right? And as I've gotten older and wiser, I've come to realize that you really need to play the long game, and that there may be blips in the road, but you got to keep your eye on the horizon and keep working towards that ultimate goal. Because otherwise, it can be very depressing if all of a sudden, if you're watching the stock market every day and you watch it minute by minute, it'll drive you crazy. But if you look at it from a 5-year span, then you can see, that it's working its way through.
Right. Well, even things like sales, keeping a client, keeping a sale, keeping someone coming back is much easier than acquiring a new one. So these principles can be applied everywhere, I think. Absolutely. And it's nice to see that businesses are listening to those of us who've worked in advocacy and nonprofits for a long time, and finding ways to use our tips in business too. So let's talk about that tool. We just have a couple more minutes. Let's talk about OBS. It is our tool of the week. I've heard about it ad nauseum for people, but Bob and I work in a very open source state. Lots of people like to use open source data and open source platforms like OBS because you can do some amazing things with it. Bob, you mentioned a little bit about it, how you can do that green screen, how this is something that's big on TikTok, people having that behind whatever the post is, or a video or a screenshot of something, and explaining in the front. But OBS has had features like that for a very long time. Is there anything else you want to mention about OBS that you like?
Well, I just want to remind people that it doesn't take much to stand out from the rest of the pack. So being able to use software like OBS lets you create images on the screen that help you tell your story. So, Zoom, for example, lets you put your name down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, or left-hand corner of the screen, with like font size 9. It's really hard to see it. And why is that? So OBS lets you do things like putting lower thirds and headlines and late breaking news kind of stuff. And it's pretty easy to do. I talked about barriers earlier. By creating scenes using OBS, if I had 4 different ways that I wanted to share information with my audience, I can create the scenes that I need to satisfy telling that story in a quick, easy way, so that I can jump in and say, okay, I've got a story I want to do about widgets, and I've got the pictures that I want and the video that I want to share. I can jump into OBS, turn on the scene that I want to use, or series of scenes, and tell that story almost seamlessly, sort of like Christian does using StreamYard, to be able to do that so easy. It's just unbelievable. And it's pretty professional. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to share was the screen that you have I look at it like a piece of real estate. What do you want to put on that screen? And if you want to be Kilroy, do you remember Kilroy? And you've only got your nose and head showing. I've seen people do that. Or if you want to brush your teeth on screen, I'm not sure people are going to take you seriously. I was running a show where, come to find out, it was the keynote speaker who didn't realize his camera was on, walking around with his T-shirt on, brushing his teeth with a little crest running down his chin. So we need to take this seriously, and the opportunity to do it is here right now, and use it while you can,
Right. I will say, I think people are 2 years into this, right? People are much more willing to accept pets coming on screen. The I forgot my camera was on. There's no excuse for that kind of stuff. But to have the pet appearance, I think, has been welcome.
And to forget to look in the camera, to forget that the person that you're talking to is in that camera. So don't look over here. Don't have a conversation like this because it's annoying, and you don't make a connection with who you're talking to. You got to talk to the camera. In that sense, I actually use a teleprompter. So I'm looking at my teleprompter right now, and I have you and Christian on the screen and me, so that when I'm looking in the camera, I can't actually see the camera. I'm just looking in Sarah's eyes right now, and it allows the experience to be that much more of a connection rather than the classic. You're looking down at your laptop and your camera's up at the top of the screen, and there's all those little things. News broadcasters don't do it that way, do they?
Right. So. Yeah. And, I was thinking you had said the Ken Burns, how he's known for those stills. Yeah. There is a setting in iMovie. I don't know if there's a setting in other ones. I haven't looked, but in iMovie, it says Ken Burns.
Yeah.
So it lets you scan in.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It makes it, I use Final Cut Pro, and they have it in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I think we've had a great conversation, dove a little bit into climate action, some of Bob's work, but also talking about how to keep things simple, especially messages. Anything else to add, Christian?
Nothing else I want to add here. Just kind of one question, I guess, for Bob, which is where's the best place for people to get in touch with him?
Well, my email's pretty easy, bob@bobthegreenguy.com. And you just Google Bob the Green Guy, and you'll find me on all the different platforms. Honestly, I'm more of a listener on Twitter. Okay. I'm pretty prolific on Facebook just because it works. Still. Yeah.
Awesome.
And if you want to see a very zen moment of Bob's daily walks, those are on Instagram too. There's times where it's like, oh, Bob's in Barnard today, or he's in Montpelier. So, and I know, Christian, I'm going to anticipate your question to me and just say you can find me across social media at Sarah Monroe VT. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, please drop a note and let me know that you saw me on Social Chatter.
Fantastic. And I'm Christian at Social Chefs across all the social platforms. We're going to have, I know, Sarah, you mentioned this earlier, we're going to have a blog post go out over the weekend, socialchefs.com/SC234, right?
Yes.
We're going to have that go out. And then our next show is next Thursday. I think it'll be 10 a.m. We haven't quite nailed that down, but probably 10 a.m. So it's going to be fun because live from Social Media Marketing World.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. So with that, I want to thank Bob for joining us. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, with that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We will have to have Bob back, have him talk a little bit more about all the initiatives he's working on. But with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all next week. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.